then we have a direct non-conceptual experience of it. So for today, I'm going to share or facilitate this discussion on the Abhayarājakumāra Sutta. Now, this sutta is the 8th sutta in this called the Majjhima Nikaya, or the middle length discourses of the Buddha. They're altogether 152 suttas. So we're going to try to cover 6 of them over the next 6 weeks. So this translation, as you can see on the cover of this book, is by Bhikkhu Nyanamoli and Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. Okay? So I think I have about 40 minutes to talk to you, and after that we'll have some Q&A, so that we'll end at 10:30. All right? Okay. So let's start by looking at this discourse. Now, because of the time factor, we will not be able to go into detail of this particular discourse, but nevertheless, I will attempt to discuss the key issues or the most significant aspects of this sutta itself. Okay. Now, in this sutta, the Buddha explains to Prince Abhaya the criteria for determining whether or not something is worth saying. So this discourse is also a beautiful example of the Buddha's skill as a teacher. So not only does he talk about right speech, but he also demonstrates right speech action. I mentioned early on at the start of this program that this series of 6 talks is about karma. Now, some of you who have listened to some teachings on karma knows that karma is manifested through 3 doors. That is through the mind door, through the speech door, and through the body. Okay? And in another discourse of the Buddha called the Nibbeda Sutta, the Buddha says, what is karma? Karma is intention. So which means the intention causes karma. Intention, when we speak with intention, when we think with, as well as when we do a particular action. Okay? So for this sutta, we will look on these aspects of speech, one aspect of karma. Now, this discourse, the main character is a person by the name of Abhaya. His full name is Abhayarājakumāra. So, as you know, the word Abhaya, I think many of you have heard of this word from, the Abhaya Mudra, the posture of no fear, right? So the word Abhaya means fearless. So Prince Abhayarājakumāra Sutta, that's his name. Now, who is Prince Abhaya? Prince Abhaya in the teachings is mentioned that he's the son of King Bimbisara. Okay, one of the 2 great kings we frequently hear during when listening or when reading texts about the Buddha. Okay, the other one being King Pasenadi. So Prince Abhaya is one of the sons, right? He's not the only son, he's not the heir to the throne for King Bimbisara, he's one of the children of King Bimbisara. I think the commentaries also subsequently say that Prince Abhaya eventually became a monk and then attained to high status of enlightenment. So that's Prince Abhaya. So today, the talk is actually about Prince Abhaya. Now, let me start with the discourse itself. It says that, thus have I heard. So I think many of you know that this phrase, thus have I heard, it is always at the start of every Buddhist discourse. So the I there is Ananda. Okay? So that means it is what Ananda heard. Now, on one occasion, the Blessed One were living at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. So Rajagaha. So today, this city of Rajagaha in India is known as Rajgir, and it is located in the city of Vihara. Now, Rajagaha during the Buddha's time was a very important city because it was the ancient capital of Magadha, where King Bimbisara was king. I think as I mentioned, there are 2 great kings during the Buddha's time, which are frequently mentioned. One is King Bimbisara, the other is King Pasenadi of Kosala. Okay. Now, Rajagaha is also important because it is one of the 8 places in the Buddha's life. And it's also the site of the first Buddhist council in 483 BC, where 500 monks gathered to recite the teaching of the Buddha. So it is believed that it was also at this first council that Venerable Ananda, the Buddha's personal attendant, he recited all these suttas that he remembered. Therefore, you have the phrase, "Thus have I heard," at the beginning of this course. So the I there refers to Ananda. Now, so then the sutta goes on. Then Prince Abhaya went to the Niganta Nataputta, and after paying homage to him, sat down on one side. Then Niganta Nataputta said to him. So the second name or second character in this discourse is Niganta Nataputta. It's a pretty long name, but I believe that in history you must have studied an Indian religion called Jainism. And the founder of Jainism is actually Mahavira. Okay, so Mahavira, I think many of you know from history. So Niganta Nataputtas refer to Mahavira. So from here, we know that Prince Abhaya was initially a student or a disciple of Niganta Nataputta. So he was a Jain, in other words. Okay? So Prince Abhaya went to the Niganta Nataputta, and after having paid homage to him, sat down on one side, and Niganta Nataputta said to him, "Prince, refute the recluse Gautama's doctrine, and a good report of you will be spread to this effect." Prince Abhaya has refuted the doctrine of the recluse Gautama, who is so powerful and mighty. So from here, you will also notice that during the Buddha's time, there's a lot of debates, primarily, well, not only between the Buddha and Mahavira of Jainism, but also with many other ascetics. Right? So there were many ascetics during the Buddha's times, and many of them tried to refute the Buddha's teachings. But as you can see, they all lost out in the end. So here you have a case where Niganta Nataputta or Mahavira telling Prince Abhaya, go and refute the recluse Gautama's doctrine. In other words, go and disprove that what the Buddha taught is false. And when you do that, a good report of you will be spread to this effect. And when this happens, everybody say, oh, you see, Prince Abhaya has refuted the doctrine of the recluse Gautama, who is so powerful and mighty. So when this was said by Niganta Nataputta, Prince Abhaya asked his teacher, Venerable Sir, how am I going to do that? How shall I refute his doctrine? So then Niganta Nataputta gave Prince Abhaya this question. He says, you ask the Buddha if he would say anything or utter a speech that is unwelcome, disagreeable, or unpleasant to others. Okay, so that's the question that Niganta Nataputta asked Prince Abhaya to question the Buddha. Would you say something that is unwelcome, disagreeable, unpleasant to others? Now, if the Buddha says, yes, I do utter speech that is unwelcome and disagreeable to others, then you have caught the Buddha. Then the Buddha is no different from any ordinary person. He's not the Buddha then. But if the Buddha says, no, I don't say anything that is unwelcome or disagreeable or unpleasant to others, then you ask the Buddha, why then did he say that Devadatta will end up in hell? Because when this was said to Devadatta, Devadatta became very angry. Now, again, just a slight distract here. You all know who Devadatta is. Devadatta was a cousin of the Buddha who became a monk, like many of the other relatives of the Buddha. And he actually became a very senior monk. But towards the later part of his monkhood, he was overridden by greed and power, and he wanted to take over the Sangha. So he went even to the extent of trying to kill the Buddha. All right. So that's Devadatta, but we will, because of time factor, we will not delve into details. So here the question Niganta Nataputta asks Prince Abhaya to question the Buddha is whether if the Buddha would say something that is unwelcome, unpleasant, and disagreeable. So if we say yes, It's no different from any ordinary person. If he says no, then ask him, why did he say that? Such things to Devadatta, which is unpleasant. So Niganta then said to Prince Abhaya that if the Buddha is posed this two-horn question, it would be like an iron spike was stuck in his throat, where he would not be able to either swallow it down or throw it out. So it's called a two-horn questions. In other words, you answer yes, you get caught. You answer no, you also get caught. You know, like a two-horn chestnut. Right? Imagine if you swallow a two-horn chestnut, it gets stuck in your throat. What will happen? So such questions are by nature not answerable with a yes or no. Prince Abhaya agreed and then went to see the Buddha. So Prince Abhaya agreed with his teacher, Mahavira, and said, okay, I will see the Buddha and I will question him. So Prince Abhaya went to visit the Buddha, and after paying homage to the Buddha, he sat down and then he looked at the sun. Oh, he thought, it's too late now. It's too late to refute the Buddha. I shall refute him in my house tomorrow. Well, the text doesn't exactly explain, and I don't think the commentaries explain either why he decided to postpone his questioning of the Buddha. Perhaps he felt a little unsure of himself, or perhaps he felt a little lacking confidence. So he decided not to, and he said, it's too late, all right? So perhaps he chickened out, all right? I shall refute him in my house tomorrow. And then he said to the Buddha, he said, I would like to invite you and 3 monks to my house for lunch, which is a house dana. Now, why 3 monks? Again, it's just conjecture. Probably Prince Abhaya must have thought, if I invite the Buddha alone, and if I manage to refute his teaching, then nobody else would know that I have refuted him. It's just me and the Buddha. But if I invite 3 monks, then when I refute the Buddha, there will be 3 other monks who would have heard that, hey, Prince Abhaya was able to defeat the Buddha in the debate. So that could be a good reason why he invited 3 monks for a house dana. So the Buddha consented in silence. That means the Buddha agreed to go to Prince Abhaya's house for dana the following day. So the Buddha and 3 monks then went to Prince Abhaya's house the next morning and sat down on the seat made ready. Then it is said that the Prince Abhaya personally served the food to the Buddha. So here, so the Prince Abhaya personally offered dana to the Buddha and waited for the Buddha to finish his meal. So when the Buddha had eaten and has withdrawn his hand from the bowl, so from here it's quite obvious that the Buddha ate the food from his bowl using his hand, right? So those days they don't use fork and spoons, and obviously no chopsticks. Yeah? Okay. So then when the Buddha had eaten and had withdrawn his hand from the bowl, Prince Abhaya took a low seat, out of respect, right? Took a low seat, sat down at one side. So that's the typical Indian custom of showing respect. You sit by one side, not directly facing the teacher. And Prince Abhaya said to the Buddha, would a Buddha, in other words, would you utter speech that is unwelcome and disagreeable to others? What was the Buddha's reply? The Buddha did not say yes. The Buddha did not say no. Instead, the Buddha said, this is a one-sided answer. Okay? So when the Buddha made that reply, Prince Abhaya exclaimed, oh, the Nigantas have lost. The Nigantas have lost. So when the Buddha heard this, he asked Prince Abhaya, why did you say that? And then Prince Abhaya reported his entire conversation with the Nigantanatta Buddha. So Prince Abhaya then reported to the Buddha that, hey, look, my teacher have asked me to come, to challenge you and to defeat you. So, but now it looks like I have been defeated. You have not been defeated because of your answer. So that is why I said the Nigantas have lost them. Okay? So the question, just to rephrase, would Buddha say anything unpleasant or disagreeable to others? If he did, If he said yes, then how is he? Then he's no different from others. If he did not, why did he speak disparagingly of Devadatta? So words that angered him. So just for us to remind ourselves. Now, from here, I've just like to digress a little bit to introduce you another short discourse. It's called the Panha Sutta. This is in the book of 4, Sutta 42, where in this discourse, the Panha Sutta, the Buddha explains that sometimes when a question is asked, there are different ways of answering it. You cannot always answer with a categorical yes or no. Okay, so in this discourse, the Buddha says there are 4 ways of answering questions. That means there may be questions that require you a direct answer. Like, is it raining? Yeah, it's a yes or no. All right. Question requiring an analysis. In other words, before you can answer that question, you got to analyze that question. All right. Why is that question asked? Thirdly, there's a question requiring a counter question. Okay. And then fourthly, question that requires a rejection. Now, again, we don't have time to look into examples of each of the 4. So I would like you to take a look at the Panha Sutta, which is in the book of 4, and then you'll find more elaborate more elaboration on this sutta. But if there's time, we can discuss a little bit about it. So there are 4 ways of answering questions. So this is found in the Panha Sutta. Now, sometimes, besides the 4 ways of answering questions, instead of just rejecting the question, the Buddha also remains silent. And there are a couple of discourses. So one is the Vacchagotta Sutta, which the Buddha spoke to Vacchagotta. Well, once when Vacchagotta went to see the Buddha and asked the Buddha, do I have a soul or do I not have a soul? In this case, the Buddha did not say, yes, you have a soul. The Buddha also did not say, no, you did not have a soul. In fact, the Buddha just remained silent. And 3 times Vacchagotta asked the question, and 3 times the Buddha remained silent. Okay? And then Vacchagotta left. So when Ananda was there, Ananda asked the Buddha, why did you remain silent? Why did you not explain to Vacchagotta? And the Buddha explained. If I had explained to Vacchagotta, saying that, yes, you don't have a soul, the timing was not right. You would not be able to understand, to comprehend the entire teachings of anatta. You will be devastated. But if I say, no, you don't have a soul, all right, he'll be devastated. But if I say yes, then I'm also siding with the eternalists who believe in the soul. Okay, so because of that, I chose to remain silent. When the time is right, I will explain to him the teaching of anatta. So on one occasion, like in the Vacchagotta Sutta, the Buddha chose to remain silent. Now, the other occasion the Buddha kept silent was on when asked certain metaphysical and speculative questions. There are altogether 10 of it. You can see on the slides. Again, I will not go into details, but you can read this in the Malunkyā Putta Sutta, which is the same book of middle length sayings, Sutta 63. So there are 10 questions. Okay? So coming back to the sutta itself, the Abhayarājakumāra Sutta. Now, if you can see at the bottom of my slide, I put the para 7. So I hope after this morning's talk, you would go back and assess the actual sutta itself and try to remember what I have mentioned by looking at the various paragraphs. Okay. So in paragraph 7, the Buddha replied that the question needed qualification. Okay. Remember the four ways of answering questions, which I mentioned earlier on. So that question needs to be qualified because you just cannot answer yes or no. It's like the typical questions, if somebody were to come to you and say, hey, John, I noticed that you have stopped beating your wife. Poor John would have said, yes. That means previously John has beaten his wife, so now he has stopped. If John would have said no, that means John is still beating his wife. So in that situation, you just cannot answer with a categorical yes or no. So you need to qualify that question. So here the Buddha replied that the question needed qualification. And noticing that the prince was nursing his little boy who lay in his lap, asked him what he would do if a pebble or a stick got into his mouth. So here the Buddha then used a simile by referring to to Prince Abhayas' son, who according to the sutta, was sitting on his lap. Right? It's probably a small boy, and asked him what he would do if a pebble or a little stone or a stick were to get into the mouth of this little boy. And Prince Abhayas said, well, I would pull it out. I would pull this stick out. I'll pull this pebble out, even if it means that I would put my finger in, and then blood flow from it. Just so would the Buddha state unpleasant truth in due season, if necessary and profitable. So we are coming now to the crux of the sutta itself. Okay, so if you look at the discourse, I've summarized it into a matrix of 6. So this is where I hope you would make reference to the sutta itself, para 8. You find that what the Buddha meant is that a speech that one utters could be false, that means not true, useless, that means not beneficial, and unpleasant. Likewise, a speech could be true, but it's useless, not beneficial, and unpleasant. A speech could also be true, it is useful, it's beneficial, but it is unpleasant. A speech that is false, is useless, is pleasant. A speech that is true, that is useless, that is pleasant. And a speech that is true, that is useful, that is pleasant. So I've colored in red. So out of the 6, it is said that the Buddha would only utter speech which is true, useful. It must have 2 very important criteria. It must be true, it must be useful. It could be unpleasant or it could be pleasant. So this is in para 8. So I've just extract the exact wording of the text again. A speech the Buddha knows is true and beneficial, but unwelcome and disagreeable, that means unpleasant to others. He knows the time to say it. A speech the Buddha knows to be true and beneficial and welcome and agreeable, that means pleasant to listen to. He knows the time to say it. What is that? Why is that? Because the Buddha has compassion for beings. So if you paraphrase it, so when a statement is true, it is useful, but unpleasant, Buddha knows the right time to say it. When a statement is true, useful, and pleasant, Buddha also knows the time to say it. So let us reflect that whatever we say, we ask ourselves, is it true? Is it useful? It may be unpleasant, but if it is for the benefit of others, we will say it at the right time. Okay, so the qualification is the right time. Now, there's another discourse I would like you to make reference to, which is the book of 5 in the Anguttara Nikaya, book of 5, Sutta 198. It's called the Vacha Sutta, that means the discourse on speech, where here the Buddha says, a speech is well spoken if it is uttered at the proper time, in line with the truth, that means truthfully, uttered gently, is uttered beneficially, and is uttered with a friendly heart. In other words, it's uttered with loving kindness, with metta. Okay? So again, I will have to skip that. We won't have time for details. So, reminds me, actually, Socrates. You know who Socrates is? Socrates actually lived almost around the same time as the Buddha. I think he lives between 470 to 400. So around the period as the Buddha, the teacher of Plato. Plato was, of course, the teacher of Aristotle. Socrates have got what is called the triple filter test, where he asks, what you're going to say, is it true? Is it good? Is it useful? If it is true, if it's good, it is useful. Just say it. If it is not true, it is not good, it is not useful, don't say it. So it's not only the Buddha that's telling us this. So Socrates has got the same. It's called the triple filter test. Okay, so Voltaire has got it on, so I'm going to skip this. You have the slide so you can look at it. If only the true and useful things were recorded, our huge historical libraries would be reduced to very narrow dimensions, but we would know more and know it better. Voltaire. So right speech, as you know, right speech is also one of the 8 limbs in the Noble Eightfold Path. So what constitutes right speech? So I'm going to discuss a little bit more about this in the Salayaka Sutta, where the Buddha talks about the 10 wholesome actions, one of the 6 suttas that I've selected on speech. Now, introduce you another sutta, it's called the Sutta Sutta. The S-U-T-A means like Sutta, that means through hearing, right? Buddha advises Vasakara, the well-known courtier of Magadha, that whatever is seen, heard, sensed, or cognized, only those that contribute to the decline of unwholesome states, the growth of wholesome states, should be spoken of. So from this sutta, we know that whatever we want to say, we ask ourselves mindfully. That's where mindfulness becomes very important. Mindfully, we ask ourselves, by saying it, does it lead to the arising of wholesome states? Does it lead to the decline of unwholesome states? If so, we will say it. But if whatever we say leads to the growth of unwholesome states, then we should not say it. Now, what are unwholesome states? Traditionally in the text, broadly categorized as greed, hatred, and delusion. So whatever we say, if it leads to greed, if it leads to hatred, if it leads to even more delusion, we should not say it. Okay, so details, please read the Sutta. So because of the short time that we have, so the best I could do is to introduce you specific suttas, so that at the end of the class, then you could make reference to all these suttas that I have mentioned here. So in para 9, so let's continue. There are only 12 paragraphs, so it's a pretty short sutta. So para 9. So how to answer them? Venerable Sir. So this is Prince Abhaya asking the Buddha, Venerable Sir, when learned nobles, Brahmins, laymen, and recluses, learned nobles, Brahmins, laymen, and recluses. Recluses would be like ascetics, samanas, for example. After they have formulated a question, were to go to the Buddha and ask the Buddha, all right? And then his question is, did they, then they ask the thought, if they come to me and ask me thus, I shall answer thus. Or does that answer occur to the Buddha on the spot? All right, so Prince Abhaya wants to ask the Buddha, if someone were to approach the Buddha and ask him a specific question, does he think through about the questions before he answer it, or does it just answer it promptly on the spot? So what was the Buddha's answer? The Buddha's answer was to ask Prince Abhaya a question in return. So this is called the chariot simile. So instead of answering Prince Abhaya's question immediately, the Buddha then asked Prince Abhaya. He said, let me ask you a question. You answer as you choose. What do you think, Prince? Are you skilled in the parts of a chariot? Right? So Prince Abhaya, so he's a prince. So he has chariots, so he rides the chariot. So, and Prince Abhaya says, yes, Venerable Sir, I am skilled in the parts of a chariot. The Buddha then asked the prince, if he were to name the various parts of the chariot, would he have to think about the answer, or would it just occur to him on the spot? Then Prince Abhaya replied, well, he says he's well known. He's well known as a charioteer. Everybody knows he's very skilled in the various parts of the chariot. He knows every part of the chariot. So the answer would just occur to him on the spot. You know, he don't have to think much about it. Somebody asks him a question, he would easily answer that. Okay? So the Buddha says, so too, when learned nobles, Brahmins, laymen, and recluses, after formulating the questions, if they were to ask the Buddha need not have to, go back and start referring to his text, or, you don't have to refer to Google or Wikipedia to find the answers. He would just answer on the spot. Okay? Why is that? Because that element of things has been fully penetrated by the Buddha. Thus, the answer occurs on the spot. So that is why the Buddha is known as the enlightened one. He's the teacher of gods and men. So he knew what to say, right? So he has a prompt answer. So he answers on the spot. Okay. So when this was said, Prince Abhaya said to the Buddha, magnificent, venerable Sir, magnificent, venerable Sir. The Blessed One has made the Dhamma clear in many ways. From today, let the Blessed One remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge for life. So this seems to be like a stock passage in many of the suttas, the ending, where someone who is out there to try to debate with the Buddha. At the end of it, when he's convinced that what the Buddha said was correct, he would say, "Magnificent, venerable sir," or "Wonderful, venerable sir," venerable sir. So he says, "The blessed one." If you remember the text early on, when he was talking with when Prince Abhaya was talking with Mahavira or Nikantanathaputta, the reference was the recluse Gautama or the samana Gautama. That is because they do not regard him as the Buddha, as the enlightened one. But in the end of the passage, here you find Prince Abhaya referring to the recluse Gautama as the blessed one, right? The blessed one, the Bhagava. So in this text itself, you read the translation of Bhikkhu Bodhi, another term that has often been used is Tathagata. So this word Tathagata is always made use of by the Buddha to refer to himself, okay? But it refers to the Buddha. So the Blessed One has made the Dhamma clear in many ways. So the Blessed One means here the Buddha has made the Dhamma. The Dhamma, as you know, is one of those words which has got a very, very deep meaning. The word Dhamma itself means, it comes from the word dhareti, one that supports, all right, one that supports. So the Dhamma means one that supports us. So if it is the Dhamma of the Buddha, the spiritual teachings of the Dhamma, one that supports us in our spiritual career. But Dhamma can also means phenomena, all right? Okay, Dhamma, like you said, Dhammanusati, so reflections on the Dhamma. So it could be the phenomena, okay? So the Buddha has made the Dhamma clear in many ways. In other words, he has made the truth clear in many ways. So from today, let the Blessed One remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge, for life. So this ends the discourse, where Prince Abhaya then went to take refuge in the Buddha. So during the Buddha's time, at the end of a discussion or a dialogue between the Buddha and some Brahmins or some ascetic or some lay person, and once this person have accepted the teachings of the Buddha, they would say, "I go to the Buddha for refuge. So you remember me as a lay follower." Of course, the commentaries have subsequently explained that Prince Abhaya later became a monk and attained to the status of enlightenment. Okay, so that concludes this short, brief, but I think very meaningful discourse about right speech. So it basically, the crux of this discourse is for us to remember that whatever we say, ask ourselves mindfully before we say something, whether it is true, it is useful. Well, if it is pleasant, we should say. If it is not pleasant, we find the right time to say. Okay, so we learn to be skillful in our speech, right? One of the things that we can learn from the Buddha is that he was a very skillful teacher. So please remember this Abhayarājakumāra Sutta, because from our speech, we create karma. Okay, so let us remember that our speech is based on, we only say things which is true, which is useful, beneficial, and if it is pleasant, always say it. If it is unpleasant, we wait for the right time to say it, timely, as mentioned in the Vacha Sutta. One of the 5 characteristics of a well-spoken speech, it must be timely. Okay, so you can see the consistency that Buddha has in all the various discourses, some of which I've mentioned in today's talk. Okay, thank you very much. We have got, I believe, 15 minutes, 20 minutes for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Benny. Brothers and sisters, if you have any questions, could you kindly type into the chat and I'll read out. Brother Benny?
Yep.
There's one question here.
Sure.
I'll read it out. Hi, Brother Benny. During our usual socializing with friends and colleagues, there are not so many useful speech, but mostly all for chit-chat, example, politics, entertainment, etc. Is it idle talks?
Well, obviously they fall into idle talk because we are basically trying to idle our time away. Okay, but there's also levels of idle talk, right? Again, when we have idle talk, are our idle talk malicious? Are they malicious? Are they full of hatred for others? So when those idle talk have got the high intensity of anger or hatred, then we create very negative karma. Okay, if the idle talk have very little of anger, of maliciousness, even though it's idle talk, then the element of negative karma, right, in terms of hatred and anger, then it becomes less. But nevertheless, it is still idle talk. Of course, we are not. We may not be monks, so we may not be able to hold on to that. But sometimes it is good that even when we are engaged in so-called idle talk, we can always also check our mind and see if we could say something useful, even during those idle talk. Whether are we able to steer our friends, our colleagues, into coming to something, into focusing on something that is more beneficial. For example, sometimes in an idle talk, we inevitably runs or ends up talking about so and so, Mr. A. Oh, Mr. A is so terrible. Mr. A is so bad. Mr. A is so full of such negative things. Now we could continue and engage in it and say, oh, really, is it true? Or we could say, we could ask questions. How well do we know that this is true? And if we know Mr. A, for example, we could say, yeah, perhaps we are all humans, so we all have our negative part. But if you know Mr. A, you could also say, I've also seen the good part of Mr. A. I think Mr. A also has got some good qualities. So when we do that, we are actually trying to cultivate harmony instead of disharmony. Okay? So we are trying to create unity instead of disunity. So sometimes even in an idle talk, if we are like a true bodhisattva or a true bodhisattva, then we could actually transform that idle talk that we have. So when people people get very excited when they talk about the bad things that so and so have done. All right, the inadequacies of a particular person. And especially if we know that particular person, so let us also try to highlight, the good points. The worst case scenario, if we don't know that person, we just listen, all right, and adopt a noble silence. We don't have to add oil to the fire and make it worse. Okay, so there are many things that we could do, or we could change the topic. We could change the topic into something that is more positive. Okay.
Okay. I think there's also a comment from the first question. But if we cut this out, then they will think we are weird and act like recluse.
Sure. Yeah. So this is why we have to be very skillful. If you are in a group of friends and they are chatting about having an idle chat and then you say, oh, I cannot join this conversation because I'm a Buddhist. Yeah, of course, people would think that, oh, you're trying to be better off than everybody else. So you don't have to adopt that approach. So skillfulness is very important, right? As I said, if you're part of that, if you're in that group, and you can choose not to be in that group, but if you choose to be in that group, then you can either, just listen, all right, give as little input as you can, and your input could be just asking questions, for example, oh, is it so? All right, where did we hear about that? And as I said, if you know that person, you can say, oh, okay, but it's so strange, because I always thought that Mr. So-and-so is actually quite a good person. And this is my understanding. Nobody is going to say you're weird. But what you have done is you have actually tried to dilute the unwholesomeness that arises in the minds of your colleagues. And actually, you're doing it out of kindness, you're doing it out of compassion. So even in a situation where you're part of that idol group, if you are skillful enough, you know what to say, when to say it, and when to remain silent. Okay? So the important thing is, you on your own, you should not be, you should not make the situation worse. You should not make the situation such that there's more anger, there's more hatred, there's more malice, and there's more delusion. Right? So if you can transform that's the situation. Okay? You study about leadership, all right? Leadership, there's a very important competency called impact and influence. All right? Impact and influence. And in my sessions with the CEOs or the leaders of our group of companies, I always tell them that, look, if you're a leader, you must have this very important competency, which is called impact and influence. And as a Buddhist, you can impact and influence people in your group. All right, so you don't have to be part of the group in the sense that you just, like a ship just falling behind. So you can still be part of a group. When you find that there is idle talk, there is malicious talk, what do? You can actually steer the discussion away from that. Are you capable of doing that? Right? If you're a Buddhist, you have this bodhisattva kind of feeling or bodhisattva aspirations that you're there to help people, to create harmony in society. Why not? Okay, so you can do that. Right? So it doesn't mean that you depict a holier than thou kind of attitude and say, oh, why are you guys talking about all this idle stuff? This is against the Dhamma. I'm a Buddhist. I observe precepts. Oh, I will not talk about it. The more you say that, people think this Dhamma that you have is weird, is strange. So you're not doing service to the Dhamma. All right? The only way you do the service of Dhamma when you practice it, when you are skillful, you even transform the other people who have such negative thoughts about such malicious thoughts. You help to transform them. Okay, and you can do that if you understand the Dhamma well.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what if the right time never comes?
Well, in Buddhism, we always believe that there's always an option. We always have options. We know when is the right time, right? Okay, and sometimes when the right time is also depend how we say it. It's not only the time. When we say timely manner, even sometimes it is, you may think it's not the right time, but it's a way how you say it. You say it well, you say it with kindness, you say it with compassion. When you say it with a kind heart, even though the timing may not be there, people can sense it. Humans have got this ability to sense another person's sincerity. So even though we say there's a right time, so the right time, you have to choose it. Right? You will have to know when is the right time. If you think that now is the time to say it, then the next question you ask is, how should I say it? As we say, there are always different ways of saying no. See? Like for example, there's another discourse called the Arana Vibhanga Sutta. So in the Arana Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha says, if you criticize a person, the person gets very upset. But if you are skillful enough, you don't criticize the person, you criticize the action, right? You criticize the action. In other words, you are able to make that person realize that that action was not the best action that he has done. So you actually deflect the blame on the person. But in the process, the person learns, right? So it's a very skillful teaching. So Buddhism is all about skills, all right? That is why the Buddha is known as the incomparable teacher of gods and men, all right? So if you read this sutta called the Arana Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha talks about how do you deal with conflict. And we all deal with conflict every day. If there's no conflict, I cannot imagine that life has got no conflict. As long as we are living in samsara, there's always conflict. Okay, so the question is, how do we deal with conflict skillfully and on a timely basis? So we cannot say when the time doesn't arise. It will always be there. Okay, it's a question of how do we deal with it. Okay, so read the Arana Vibhanga Sutta. Okay, that is a wonderful sutta. It tells you about how do you deal with conflict.
Okay, the next question says, "Hi brother, what if my speech is untrue but is useful, pleasant and beneficial to others? Can I speak this?"
So this is always the perennial question, like a white lie, like a white lie. So do you tell a white lie? Because white lie means it's not true, all right? But it is useful, all right? It's useful. For example, there's the classic story in the Lotus Sutra. Some of you may have heard about the parable of the burning house. So, inside the house, there's a group of small boys who are busy playing, they're so engrossed in playing the toys. And then suddenly there was a big fire. But the children were also so engrossed in playing with the toys that they're oblivious to the fire that's burning. And then the parent who is outside saw the fire. The parents keep on saying, "Come, get out of the house. There's a fire." But the boys couldn't be bothered. The children couldn't be bothered because they're so busy playing with the toys. And the father decided to say, Come, I've got even better toys. I've got these toys, these wonderful toys you have always wanted. So when the children heard it, immediately they rushed out. But actually, there were no toys. All right. So, but why did the father did that? The father did that because to save the child or save the children. All right. It wasn't true. So you can call it a white lie. So sometimes it depends on really very special situation. But we should not use that as an excuse to say, it's okay. Sometimes we should speak falsehood as long as we do something useful. Because more than anything else, sometimes we always justify our actions. Okay, so those are really exceptional cases. So when it comes to a situation like the parable of the burning house, so then you are debating between me breaking my precept of lying, not telling the truth, and saving some lives. So which would you do? All right. So you would say, perhaps, okay, I will bear the consequences of the karma of telling this lie in order to save sentient beings, in order to save lives. Okay. But those are not things you do every day. All right. Those are not things that you do, every moment of your life. Right. So we should not look at one exception and say, because of that, then it's okay for us to speak falsehood as long as it's useful. Okay, so treat that as an exception rather than the rule. Right? The rule is we should always say something that is true, something that is useful. It could be pleasant, it could be unpleasant. Okay? If you are so skillful that you could, get things done without telling a lie, that's wonderful. So it's all a question of how do we develop our skillfulness. Okay?
Okay, next question. For parents who need to guide their children or teenagers, can they use words of admonishment?
Well, sure, definitely. Because those admonishment will be the third aspect, which is true, which is useful, it is unpleasant. All right. the Buddha himself used, from the example, because of time factor, I didn't go into examples. For example, in the fire sermon, Abhayarājakumāra Sutta, the Buddha says, look, your hair is on fire, your eye is on fire, your nose is on fire, your tongue is on fire, the six senses are on fire. It's very unpleasant. But the Buddha said it because that is to jerk you, to push you into your practice. So as a parent, you have to be firm with your child, but that firmness is based on loving kindness and compassion. It's based on the mother's love for the child. It is not based on anger, even though at that moment there may be aspects of anger, all right, but that anger is quickly superseded by, for example, thoughts of loving kindness and compassion. So we can admonish our children, we can be very firm, all right, but we do it with a good intention. So the other aspect is intention. What is our intention? Okay, sometimes you find some Dhamma masters, they look very stern, very firm, right? Why? Because that's one way to ensure that the students would be serious in the practice. But when you get to know them better, you find that they have a very kind heart, very open heart, very gentle heart. Okay, so different teachers, even His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he can be very firm at times, even though every time when you listen to him, he's always laughing and smiling, but he has a very strong side of it. Okay. So in leadership development, we said we try to be assertive without unnecessarily becoming aggressive. All right. So from the Buddhist perspective, we admonish someone, but the intention is because we want that person to be good. Okay. The Buddha himself admonished many of his monks, of his disciples. This is sole intention, right? The story of the Buddha and Vakali, right? In the Vakali Sutta, there was this monk known as Vakali. He was so enchanted with the physical appearance of the Buddha that when the Buddha was, there's a legend that the Buddha was away in the heavens teaching the Abhidhamma. So he couldn't see the Buddha. So he was very frustrated. He was very disenchanted. And when then news went to the Buddha, so the Buddha came down, after his teaching, told Vakali, what are you looking at his body for? He who sees the Dhamma sees me. Remember that phrase? He who sees the Dhamma sees me. So here the Buddha was admonishing Vakali, right? But with good intention, right? Not out of malice, not out of anger, not out of hatred, right?
Okay. Next question is related to white lie too. It asks, what is your opinion on telling a white lie to suit a conflict situation? Or we should not tell?
Well, as I mentioned early on, white lies, I give the parable of the burning house in the Lotus Sutra. By the way, the Lotus Sutra is not in the Pali Canon, right? So don't search for it in the Pali Canon. So in the parable of the burning house, so I said those are really exceptions. Right? So why are you telling the white lie? Is it really to just for your convenience? All right. I would think we should always try as much as we possibly can to stick to the norm, which is to say something that is true, that is useful, that is pleasant. You really have to tell a white lie. You ask yourself, what is the significance? How important it is for me to say this white lie? The parable of the burning house, because you are saving lives, it has got such a serious magnitude that you tell the white lie to save someone. The famous, again, the classical story. One night you're walking back home, maybe past midnight, and then you pass a dark alley. And then suddenly you hear a group of people, shouting, and then you turn back, and then you saw a young boy or a young girl running away, and then behind, and then you could sense that there was a group of people trying to kill this person or trying to harm this person. So when this person comes to you and said, "Please help me, somebody is trying to kill me," Can you hide me somewhere? And then you saw there's an alley there. So do you say, oh no, I will keep my precept. I'm sorry if you get killed as your bad karma. You can choose to do that, all right? Okay. Or you can be very humane and say, okay, I will break this precept to save your life. I will bear the consequences of this karma. And then you tell, go and hide there. So when this little boy or this girl hides there, and then here comes this 4 or 5 burly-looking men with knives, and these 5 men ask you, "Do you see this? Do you see a boy, running away?" What do you say? "Oh yeah, he's hiding there. I must speak the truth." And then the boy will probably killed or injured. Or you could say, "Oh, he went the other way." Then the 5 men with the knives ran the other way, and then the boy is safe. So it's a choice, an option you have to make. All right. So in this particular case, this hypothetical case, but again, it may not be hypothetical, it may actually happen. All right. Like what it happened during the Second World War, when there were some very kind people who tried to shield the Jews from being killed by the Germans. All right. I'm sure they would have spoken white lies to hide some Jews so that they're not killed. So in such situation, you take upon yourself and say, yes, I will bear the consequences of this karma of telling a lie because my intention is I want to save lives. All right, I want to save a human life. From the Buddhist perspective, a human human life is a precious human life. All right, in some of the discourses like the Balapandita Sutta, the Buddha says, to be born as a human is even more rare than a turtle that lives under the, under the mighty ocean, and that comes up once maybe in 1,000 years and put its neck into a wooden yoke that floats on the water. So even more rare is the birth of a human being. So here you are protecting a human life. Okay, so it's a choice you have to make. Please remember, as long as we are in samsara, nothing is perfect. Samsara is imperfect. As long as we live in samsara, we are imperfect. The guiding principle is that we do whatever is best, all right, that we can help another sentient being. Okay, so I think that's my response to it.
Okay, thank you, Brother Benny. Next question. At work, when there is a situation dealing with higher management or authority that will affect us professionally or will pose future inconveniences, should we speak out?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what kind of organizational culture your organization has. If your organization encourages frankness, directness, transparency, for you not to speak out, then you will not be considered a good staff in an organization, all right? But if you work for an organization where people are not expected to speak out, people are not expected to be vocal, all right? You're not supposed to speak your mind. Then you got to be skillful. You got to find a way how you get your message through. Maybe not in an open forum, but privately on a one-to-one basis. Okay, so it actually depends on the organizational culture. And I mentioned early on, one of the things that as a Buddhist is that we must always understand that we must have confidence, all right? Saddha, faith. So confidence, while it is a spiritual quality, it is also very important. One of the 5 spiritual qualities. For you to be successful in anywhere, whether in a secular life or in a spiritual life, you must have confidence, all right? So if you have confidence, then you build up the right skills. How do you how do you react with your superiors? Okay. In fact, if you have that confidence and whatever you say is authoritative, in other words, you say with facts, right? Today we talk about data analytics, right? So if you have all the data, you speak with facts, you approach your superior with facts and with confidence. I don't think your superior or your boss is going to be upset with you. He or she may feel intimidated, of course, that, hey, look, there's somebody who's going to take my job. So again, it's how skillful you are when you deal with your boss. Okay, you have to understand human personalities. Okay, we can have one session talking about this. So unfortunately, in this brief session, that's all that I can say.
Okay. This participant is asking whether you can share your presentation slides.
Oh yeah, of course. There's no copyright. Anybody can have it.
Okay, thank you. I think later we will post it in our PUB's website, and then you can actually download it. Yeah. Okay, next question. Brother Benny, can we say that we should not be judgmental?
Yes, we should not be judgmental. So what should we be? We should be judicious. You know, there's a difference between these two terms. Judicious, right? All right. So let's be judicious instead of judgmental. You have any more questions because of time?
Yeah, I think this. You take this final question. What if we are asked to voice out about some injustice that is happening? What is a skillful way to handle the situation?
What if we were asked to voice out about some injustice? Well, it depends. What is this injustice all about? How to be skillful to handle the situation? If for example, is there some details? It's from Chong Wing Tam, is it? Could be more specific, then we could look at it. What do you mean by injustice? Is it like injustice on a national level, injustice in the company, injustice at home? If there's injustice at home, you feel that your parents have not been fair to you, there's injustice. Well, you're born into that family. You just got to wait till you're adult, and then you leave the home, and then no more injustice. If you feel that there's injustice in the country, all right, then we all have options. We can choose to live in another country. We feel that there's no injustice, all right? Okay, so in a company, if there's injustice in the company, every company, I think there's always a grievance process, isn't it? I'm sure every company would have a grievance process. So you can always take what you think is injustice to your immediate boss. And if your immediate boss is not able to solve it, most companies would have an HR department. They should take it to the HR department and voice out what you deem as injustice. Okay, but before you regard it as an injustice, you must have your facts. Why do you say it's an injustice? Okay, so the skillful way is go through the process, right? and to find out why do you call it injustice. Okay, all right. But because your question is very general, so I can only give you a very general response.
Okay. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this session. Thank you very much, Brother Benny, for the informative and inspiring Sutta teaching. On behalf of Babs and all the participants, we would like to show our gratitude and appreciation by saying Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu. Brothers and sisters, we have now come to the end of our Sunday Puja session. Thank you very much for your participation. And do join us again next week for the continuation of Brother Benny's Sutta's teaching. Until then, take care. May you and your family be well and happy always. Sadhu.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.